on the VT I'd say that's actually a really good thing about the fact that fans are ready to rally around those programs going forward. So there's a lot of directions we can go with that. There are a lot of directions that we will go with that. Now, as we welcome in Debbie Antonelli, Westwood One basketball analyst, you'll hear her on the Final Four and the Women's Championship games Friday and Sunday right here on the VTR and Sports app. She covers men's basketball and women's basketball as well for ESPN and the ACC Network. Debbie, great to be speaking with you in the Fast Lane. Not sure how much of that discussion from the beginning of the show that you called of ours, but we're very pleasantly surprised and pleased that we had one of the strongest marches that we've had in terms of listenership, despite the struggles of Virginia and Virginia Tech on a local level with the basketball side of things. Are you surprised in this area?
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. I think hoops is on the upswing. That's why you're getting a lot of ratings on these calls. I think it's good.
It is. Look, I saw that this morning and putting the metrics together, and we kind of do monthly and then quarterly reports, and I was, it's a fist pump moment for those that are checking us out at Fastlane, Edlane, and VTR in Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube as I pump my fist because it was really exciting. You mentioned basketball being on the upswing. What does that say about the resiliency of the fans throughout the fact that there's a lot of turmoil in college basketball and there's a lot of change, but not all of this is necessarily bad change?
Ed, this is a time everybody celebrates the great game. This is one of the all-time great sporting events in our culture, and everyone wants to have a piece of it. Even the people that don't consume sport regularly or watch basketball like we do all the time, they just want to be a part of it. Everybody wants to fill out a bracket and everybody wants to go to a party. And it's just a fun time to gather. Sports is supposed to be a collection of all different types of people coming together to have some fun. And usually it's over a meal and it's fun.
We'll break down the women's side of things. We're going to tease that for a moment because you've got the call of the women's Final Four Friday and the women's championship this Sunday afternoon on the VTR and Sports app from Westwood One as Debbie Antonelli's with us in the Fast Lane. But the men's side in particular, because it's not just Virginia and Virginia Tech being down, but the ACC, there's only one team that's made it this far, and yet interest in our area is still strong. Is there a call to action now that has been put out to the ACC, whether it's Virginia Tech with the renewed financial commitment for Mike Young, Virginia with the financial commitment, plus finding a new hire in Ryan Odom from VCU and bringing former Longwood men's coach Griff Aldrich, among others, onto the staff, that the ACC is starting to answer, even though it doesn't pay immediate dividends for this March Madness?
I don't know if there's a collective, edict from the conference office, but I do think the league has hit somewhat rock bottom, and I think there's nowhere else to go but up. And investment in the product is what's important. It's the landscape of the game, so you have to have the right leadership that can manage all the nuances of the NIL and the transfer portal. And coaches are finding general managers, and they're managing and navigating college basketball in a different way. And really, none of them were trained to do any of that. They were trained to coach their teams, but they're all learning, and they're picking it up quickly. And, I hate to say it, but whoever's got the most money is going to have the most success.
It's a big part of it. And Virginia mentioning their renewed financial commitment, of course. You've got Virginia Tech as well with Mike Young and what they say they are going to give him in terms of the equipment to do their resources. A big picture. And we'll have more time in the offseason and heading to next season to look at Virginia and Virginia Tech. Are Hokie and Wahoo fans justified in having optimism right now at the direction of their men's basketball programs?
Heck yeah, man. They should be so excited. First of all, Mike Young is one of the true gentlemen and ambassadors of our game. He is a great teacher. He will get the right pieces, and when he has the right pieces, because of the way he runs his system and how they play, he's always going to be in contention. We already know he's won an ACC championship. He knows how to do it. And then Ryan Odom, he's got incredible pedigree. He knows the league. He has studied the league for a long time, and it's great to have him back in the league, which means we get his dad around too. That's going to be fun. I think the investment is the important thing, and having the right people on top. And if you do that, you should be excited.
Debbie Antonelli 12, Instagram, and Debbie Antonelli on Twitter to keep up with Westwood One analyst Debbie Antonelli. You'll hear her Friday, 6 p.m., or 6:30 p.m., and then Sunday afternoon as well on the VTR and Sports app for the women's Final Four. And we'll get to the women's side of things in just a moment. But for the men, only one team made the Final Four. You mentioned the rock bottom concept for the ACC and the desire for them to go forward. How big of a boost is it for the conference what the Duke Blue Devils have done this season and the fact that there still is a lot more they can very well accomplish coming up in San Antonio.
Look, the league has prepared them for all the styles that they might see. And I have no question that they're ready. The Houston matchup for Duke is going to be really interesting. As a basketball junkie, this is the one I was hoping for. I had Houston in Wichita when I was covering the men's tournament for CBS, and they are very predictable about what they do defensively. They're going to bring two to the ball in the middle. They're going to trap the post, and they rotate with high hands with good habits. And Duke is perfectly suited to play them. They have perimeter size, and they have Malawatch at the rim. Nobody has a Malawatch. And then I haven't even mentioned Cooper Flagg yet. So once you get to Cooper Flagg, you got a guy who can break off the offense anytime and get a bucket. But the thing about Duke is when you watch them play, it's a lot of swing, swing, three. Inside, out, swing, swing, three. It's very well designed. Their spacing's outstanding. And that could give a trapping, pressing, over-aggressive defense some trouble.
Debbie, you mentioned all of this with the Duke Blue Devils and the way they functioned throughout the entire season. What level of credit goes to Jon Scheyer on this really solidifying him, the run they've been on in terms of being a viable coach long-term in Durham, which I don't know if anybody doubted it, but you're succeeding Coach K, so it's natural to have a real challenge that he's going to be able to keep Duke at the high standard Coach K had them.
Yeah, there's that old cliche, you can't replace a legend. Well, I think Jon Scheyer's proving that you can. And he has had good teams. Last year, NC State was on an incredible run. Otherwise, they would have been there last year. This is consistency. It's what you want. It's what you expect. Coaches want it day to day. Fans want it day to day. And that's what Jon has done. He's fantastic. He's a finalist for the Naismith Coach of the Year. He's done an incredible job with his group.
Debbie, pivoting from the men's basketball to the women's basketball, you'll be on the call of the Final Four and the championship game this coming weekend right here on the VTRN Sports app and asking your smart speaker, open VTRN Sports, as Debbie Antonelli is hanging out with us today in the fast lane. The women's side of things, Carolina missed the chance to go. Notre Dame obviously lost. We'll get to Olivia Miles in just a moment, but we'll also touch on North Carolina. How good of a year was this for the ACC and women's basketball, even though they didn't quite get anybody over the hump into the Final Four?
Overall, I think it was a really competitive league, and NC State being a 2 seed, they earned it. Notre Dame was questioning their 3 seed. I thought that was appropriate. Duke was definitely a 2 seed. I thought they all had good seasons. North Carolina had their best year. It's unfortunate that you got to meet your rival, especially your neighborhood rival, in the Sweet 16. That's a tough thing, but with the super conferences, that's going to happen more often. I thought they all had good years, and I think they all have something to build on. There are going to be some new stars in the league next year. Wait and see how the portal shakes out for who gets what. But overall, it was a good year, and I thought they represented in the tournament well.
We'll get to that in a moment, the new outlook for the ACC in terms of overall stars that'll come in there. But part of that trends into the discussion that has popped up so far, and that is Olivia Miles. She's foregoing the WNBA draft. Instead, she's entering the transfer portal. Are we going to see more of this in women's basketball where not just top players, but plenty of other players sense an opportunity to land a lucrative deal, maybe more so in women's basketball, just because in the NBA, a lot of it's about getting to that second contract, which is just so lucrative in the WNBA. Right now, they don't have anything like the second contracts in the NBA. Is this a trend that we'll see more in women's college basketball where a lot of players realize that it's a very narrow window in terms of striking while the iron's hot?
I definitely think there's a financial component to it for sure, but in her particular case, because I had them 10 times, when you have a team 10 times, you see all their warts. She needs to get better going left. She's got to get stronger physically, and she needs to learn how to play defense. She was the weak link that got picked on at the end of the season. I didn't really think she was the number 2 pick. I think there's a lot of experts out there that did not think that. But, once the narrative gets out there, it's really hard to pull that narrative back, especially for a young player. But I do think financially she's going to find more money in the portal. And I think she's going to find a spot where she's going to get better and improve her stock for next year, because I definitely don't think she was going to be the number 2 pick.
You've referenced the transfer portal, and we'll step back before diving into the Final Four from Westwood 1, which is this Friday, and the championship, which is this Sunday for the NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament with Debbie Antonelli, who's hanging out with us in the fast lane. For Virginia, We've discussed, and when we spoke with you last, we went in depth about Alexis Ohanian spearheading the investment in Virginia women's basketball. How much do you believe the Lady Wahoos will be active and able to upgrade their roster now that they've got that behind them?
Oh, my goodness. Are you kidding? I tried to find out what the transformational gift was and couldn't get any headway with it because I can't call it transformational unless I have some sort of ballpark idea what that means. And because I don't know how much money it is, but it sounds like it's significant. And if you've got significant amount of money in a space in the Virginia market where you can attract players like Tanaya Latson and or Olivia Miles, I definitely think that it's going to make a difference. And that's what Virginia wants to do. They want to make an impact now, and they're capable of doing it because they have investment.
There's a lot more at the disposal for the Virginia Lady Cavaliers. Meanwhile, for the Virginia Tech Lady Hokies, roster reset and reshuffling after the first year of the Megan Duffy era. Overall, is this about where you expected Virginia Tech Lady Hokies basketball to be after 1 year in their new era after Kenny Brooks?
My job is to be able to tell you how good these teams are and how hard they work and educate the viewer along the way. If you had seen Virginia Tech in November and you saw them at the end of the season, you would see a remarkable job that Megan Duffy did on getting that team ready to play and ready to play at an elite level. They just missed the NCAA tournament. They were close. But, I think she's done a remarkable job, and Megan is smart. She'll figure out how to navigate whatever she needs to play, get the players she needs for her system. It's not that complicated, but it requires a lot of bargaining power now. And coaches are used to recruiting and selling. She'll figure it out. She'll get what she needs.
Pivoting off of what's available in the offseason, as Debbie Antonelli is with us in the fast lane. And for those observations, you can always stay connected. Debbie Antonelli 12, Instagram, and Debbie Antonelli on Twitter, to the Final Four. Starting with the women's Final Four this coming Friday in San Antonio, right here on this coming Friday, not in San Antonio, that's where the men are, but this coming Friday right here on the VTR and Sports app. Is this the Final Four, much like the men with the number one seeds? I know they're not all number one seeds, but given the unfortunate Juju Watkins injury with Connecticut and Steg going, is this the Final Four that you wanted to see in terms of intriguing matchups blended with star power and the best teams from the season in women's college hoops?
I don't think there's any question. We have 4 first-class brands in our game. And to catapult and launch from what we did last year with the Caitlin Clarks of the world, this is an opportunity for us to continue the momentum and having solid brands here, brands that have won in the past. All 4 brands have won a national championship at some point. So that doesn't usually happen at the Final Four. That's going to be fun. Having UConn here will bring a crowd. I expect the FAMs from the University of South Carolina, which Dawn Staley affectionately calls her fan base, the FAMs, as in family. I expect them to take over the city as well. UCLA can score. You got to score with UConn. They are too talented on the offensive end. You can't stop them, but you've got to score with them. And then I think on the other side of the bracket, it's all defense. So what the final score of the South Carolina-Texas game might be, the halftime score of the UCLA-UConn game.
Yeah, that South Carolina-Texas game might be like your race to 50 total. If you get over 30 in the first half, that might be that might be something that will shock most of us, given how defensive oriented they are, particularly South Carolina in particular. Are you anticipating the South Carolina-UConn rematch that a lot of people want to see, especially based on the Lady Huskies winning earlier this year?
I think it's going to be really intriguing on that side of the bracket because South Carolina has 2 wins over Texas already this year. They both split on their regular season and won at home. And then South Carolina beat Texas in the SEC championship game. I think Madison Booker, the SEC Player of the Year, is going to have something to say about whether Texas advances. I like her ability to break off the offense at any time. I think Texas's defense is tough and stingy. I think they have a little more team speed on the perimeter than South Carolina. So I sort of like Texas coming out of there, and I think UConn's experience is really hard to beat here.
Debbie, we'll wrap it up on this. Women's Final Four, men's Final Four. There are a lot of fascinating matchups. The men, all 4 number 1 seeds. The women, we know it's not quite that because of UConn getting in there. But, I mean, gosh, it feels like they might as well be a number 1 seed given their pedigree and their history and the fact that they're a really deserving team. Will this be the best collection of women's and men's Final Fours that we've seen?
Oh boy, I don't know if I can go that far deep, but I think it's going to be pretty compelling because we got great storylines here in Tampa, and I know San Antonio is full of the same great storylines. But the one thing you should know is, like, when you're watching TV and you see all those commercials, you see a lot of more women's college players on all those commercials than you do men. So our game's in good shape here in Tampa.
It'll be fun, and we'll be listening. Friday evening is when our Final Four coverage starts, men's and women's. Megacast on all of our talk stations, and the easy way to remember is the VTRN Sports app. Debbie, thank you for your time in the Fast Lane, and we'll keep it locked to Debbie Antonelli 12 on Instagram and Debbie Antonelli on Twitter.
Great to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. Debbie Antonelli with us here in the Fast Lane. When we return, speaking of basketball, tons of news and nuggets there, plus some NFL developments that no doubt will have Trey, pun intended here, buzzing tomorrow in the morning warm-up. This is the Fast Lane on the VTRN Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTRN Sports.
Selection, value, finance options, and exceptional service. Why start anywhere else? It's all in one location at the Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile. And with straightforward pricing and inventory arriving daily, there's no reason to start anywhere else than the Motor Mile. Volume selling means volume pricing, and we've got the volume. The Used Car Superstore is your one stop for most makes and models. Cars, trucks, vans, SUVs, many have miles in the teens, remaining factory warranties, and some are even local one-owner vehicles. Shop over 900 used vehicles in stock now, more than any other dealer in the area. Sheeler owns the finance company, so getting approved for credit is easy on the Motor Mile. With financing options for every budget, you're a valued customer and not just a number on the Motor Mile. The Used Car Superstore on the Sheeler Motor Mile, your premier family-owned car dealer serving Southwest Virginia and surrounding areas for 50 years. I-81 exit 118C in Christiansburg. Call 866-SHEELER1. Always open at Sheeler.com. And we're excited to welcome Honda and Hyundai to the Motor Mile family. Why start anywhere else?
When you're voted one of the best plumbers according to Lynchburg Living magazine, you want to hire the best. Sullivan Plumbing wants the best plumbers to join our award-winning team. Do you have a clean driving record? Do you have at least 4 years plumbing experience? Then you're a 5-star recruit, and Sullivan Plumbing would love to meet with you. Take the first step. Call Sullivan Plumbing in downtown Lynchburg or email sullivanplumbing@gmail.com.
Guests are great, except unwanted guests. At Specialty Exterminating, we know the difference. Hi, I'm Sabrina Kennan with Specialty Exterminating. We help you keep unwanted pests out of your home. Now we can keep those reptiles away. Our new reptile repellent is the perfect add-on for your pest prevention service. It's pet and people safe, so it's perfect for any homeowner, especially pool owners and homes in wooded and rural areas. Call us so we can repel the reptiles. Specialty Exterminating, your pest prevention partner since 1979.
It's natural to wonder why you should consult a legal advocate after a serious auto accident. The reason is personal injury cases are complex. Hi, I'm Randy Trost with Trost Law. Filing a claim isn't just about filling out a form and waiting for a check in the mail. Most accident resolutions require intricate knowledge of Virginia's personal injury laws and experience working with insurance companies. That's where Trost Law will help. Call us at 777-HURT and visit trostlaw.com so we can do the work to obtain the best result for you.
Imagine a community where every homeowner feels heard and valued.
That's the feeling you deserve, and that's the feeling you'll get at Brownstone Properties.
Our dedicated team is here to support you, ensuring clear communication and proactive solutions. Transform your homeowners associations. Call Brownstone Properties today for a free consultation. Brownstoneproperties.com and 3720 Old Forest Road in Lynchburg. Let's build a better community together.
Hi, this is Bill Roth, voice of Virginia Tech football. You're listening to The Fast Lane with Ed Lane and Trey Lyle. Join the chat at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
I mean, I guess you could say it's with Trey Lyle because he is listening to the Fast Lane, but it's actually TJ hanging out with me today. Hi, TJ. What's going on?
Oh, nothing much, man. I was enjoying the conversation that you had with Debbie. I mean,
it was more
a lot of fun.
It was more her insight than my. I'm just asking the questions and letting Debbie grace us with her knowledge. And if you missed any of it after the show, it'll be up shortly. Fast Lane Ed Lane, where you listen to podcasts, and VTR in Sports and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook Live and YouTube. But this is where you and I get to discuss, kind of ping pong some things right now.
Oh boy.
Right now in the Fast 5 at 5-ish.
It's time for Fast Five at Five-ish. Five-ish minutes on 5 relevant topics done around 5 p.m.-ish. Ish, because our counting skills are kind of ish. Let's start with number 5.
I mean, look, I know they're calling it a clerical error, but Liberty's starting pitcher Ben Blair, who was not on the roster for this past weekend series, despite being an LCA product and the ace of the Liberty rotation, then throwing one pitch in the bottom of Game 1 against Jacksonville State, and as Bryson Gordon of NewsAdvance.com detailed very well on the morning warm-up with Trey and Ty earlier today, the morning warm-up wherever you listen to podcasts or VTR in Sports on Facebook Live and YouTube to go back and check out the stream if you prefer to consume it that way. As Bryson detailed, you can call it what it is, but Jack State was clearly prepared and aiming for it. To not have him on the roster at all is a gross error. And I don't know whether it's a staffer, an intern, or somebody else, but to me, this is just TJ. It's just double checking your work before turning it in.
And what's crazy, Ed, is that this isn't just any player. This is a star player on your team, well known in the area. I don't know how they missed that.
No, I don't either. And people are talking about the Jacksonville State angle to this, and the fact that as soon as he threw a pitch, the Jacksonville State coach or manager, or whatever we call these people nowadays, came out and said, hey, he's not on the roster. That's a forfeiture. By the way, kudos to Nick Pierce of the Liberty Flame Sports Network for somehow navigating that situation. Bryson listened to it. I was at Martinsville along with Trey. Time to get my usher on. So the exchange students and I were down there and not listening live. But I've navigated some weird situations in broadcasts. If you do baseball, you're going to have them because it's got more weather delays. But that was an impressive element of work for Nick Pierce, and Bryson detailed it. But I will say this about the Jacksonville State manager. As petty as it might seem, I don't have an issue with it. It's your job as a program to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. If I'm a Liberty Flames fan, twofold. One, I should be more upset at my own staff for missing this opportunity.
Absolutely.
They have, as great as they've been, beating 4 ACC teams in non-conference play. I do think it's reasonable to say, is this part of having a younger coach? Because Bradley LaCroix was only a couple of years at VCU before coming to Liberty.
Yeah.
And more experienced coaches, not all of them, but a lot of them have just gone through a lot of the minutia that when you're a coach, it's less about even the X's and O's and that part. You get to have some of that, but it's making sure everything's tied up so that something like this doesn't happen.
I mean, yes, younger experience definitely plays a part in it, but there's also people on the baseball team staff that have been there since Scott Jackson was there. You think they could have caught that mistake. But all in all, to say, mistakes do happen. Jacksonville State capitalized on it. Let's not act like Liberty would have capitalized on it if it was vice versa, the other way around.
Look, I mean, that's a good point about this. And, I'm not an unwritten rules of the game guy. I know I'm not traditionalist in baseball. I'm not even going to say I'm sorry because I'm not. I just think some of it's stupid and ridiculous. You're finding whatever advantage you can possibly get, which we'll get to in number 3. But for Liberty, going about doing this, there's a personal accountability element to this. But I will say about this, with Ben Blair not being on the roster this past weekend, the moment he threw a pitch, the Jacksonville State coach came out and said that's an ineligible player. The referees confirmed it, and it led to a Liberty forfeit. It leads us into a question we discussed with the SeaofRed.com's John Manson yesterday, and that is between this and the fact that they've played meaningful games in basketball, they've had some in football.
Yeah.
And, yes, there's a history with Kennesaw State, but they've been ravaged by the portal. New Mexico State football, obviously, they don't have Jerry Kill or Diego Pavia. They don't look anything alike. Has Jacksonville State kind of blossomed into Liberty's new rival in Conference USA?
Look, I would say they were rivals in the ASUN. The last time Liberty was there, Jacksonville State took their opportunity away in the ASUN tournament. Absolutely. I think Jacksonville State could be considered a rival. If we're talking about Liberty rivals, everyone wants to put JMU on top, but JMU has not faced us in years. So I would honestly say Jacksonville State's up there, Coastal's up there, JMU, and so forth.
They're all up there. Liberty will play JMU in football this year, which is a great opportunity. I love that idea. They played ODU a couple years ago.
Yeah.
They played JMU. finding these locally relevant rivals, whenever all the dust settles, I mean, who knows where Liberty will find and where all these programs will be in the ultimate landscape. But I'd love to see more regional rivalries return to college sports, and they're mostly there. But college football and basketball, it would just make it more exciting. But hey, you got to fill it while you're there. And Jacksonville State has been there between, Coach Harper for men's basketball at Jack State is kind of a prickly individual. Accessibility is not necessarily his thing. Rich Rod particularly always wanted to stick it to Liberty when he was at Jacksonville State in football. I get it. They're no longer in that spot, but there's that attitude. And now you've got this in baseball. There are multiple sport examples now where Jack State has been the one that almost is just poking the bear, or pun intended here, sparking the flames.
Yeah, absolutely.
Meanwhile, personal accountability. Oh, I'm a fan of this. There are two things that have popped up in the last 73 hours. The baseball torpedo bat situation with the Yankees,
buddy,
and the tush push with the Philadelphia Eagles. It drives me nuts when these things are completely legal within the rules of the game, and you've got competitors just whining and moaning about it.
Yeah.
Do something about it. If you're a baseball team, everyone's talked about the Yankees and their offensive barrage against Milwaukee this past weekend. Well, there are players on other teams. The Cubs have got a couple. I believe one of them for the Dodgers as well.
Yeah.
They've got these torpedo bats. If they're legal and you see that there's an advantage, here's an idea. Contact the guy. You've got, as Kenny Powers would remind us,
dollar bills, y'all.
to pay for some of these, whether you're a player or better yet, an organization to acquire these. Play catch up. It's early in the season. We've got 6 months of baseball in the regular season. Part of my language is, what the hell are we waiting for? Why? And then the other one about complaining is the tush push. We want to ban it because we don't know how to stop it. Stop it! Come on! Quit being babies. The Green Bay Packers are the worst offenders of that.
Yeah.
I mean, really? You can't stop. First of all, they effectively used it in the NFC wildcard round, which you heard on your home for great play-by-play, the VTR and Sports app. The Packers used it themselves. Oh, Sean McDermott thinks it's a safety issue. No, you haven't studied enough tape as a defensive coach to figure out how to A, stop it, but B, properly execute it when you have just as strong of a quarterback. Okay, maybe he can't squat 600 pounds like Jalen Hurts, but he's 6'5", like 260. You should be able to execute the tush push in Buffalo with Josh Allen. Figure it out. And if you can't, then it's not some cheating advantage. Some teams just do it better. But this whining about it is beyond absurd. And to me, I want to know the teams that are that way, that really were pushing and whining for it. Because to me, it speaks to a softness and a wussification in their organization. And the Packers are at the top of the list for me in that. I mean, it's the wussiest thing. Oh, we can't soft it. Come in and bail us out. No. How about you study the film and grow some backbone and maybe some muscle and find a way to stop this? But whether it's that, the bats in baseball with the torpedo bats, the tush push, people who are upset about the hack-a-shack. Oh, it's so unfair. It's bad for the game. Here's an idea. Make your free throws. Get better at it. Or in baseball, oh, the shift is so bad. Well, here's an idea. Slap the ball or bunt it to the side where there's nobody and keep doing it until someone adjusts. There's strategy involved. Guess what sports is? A game of strategy. Really? We can outlaw all the things that somebody does really well and doesn't do well? This is so beyond just absolutely ridiculous. Meanwhile,
number 2,
calming down for a second. Although maybe getting hyped if you're a Virginia Tech fan. Men's basketball coach Mike Young announced today Chester Frazier will return to the program staff. He was there previously. He left for a couple different gigs, most notably as the associate head coach at West Virginia. He is a great defensive mind. And for Mike Young, who's a great offensive mind, he's the great complementary piece. This, to me, is another example. I know there's talk of more funds for Virginia Tech in terms of basketball player retention, and it appears to be the case. But going in on a great defensive coach as well, like Chester Frazier, who's now been at other stops, this is a really shrewd move that should have Hokies fans excited. Trey is one of them. He'll probably have thoughts on this tomorrow on the morning warm-up. And, of course, we'll ask David Cunningham of TechSideline.com next Monday in Covering the Commonwealth. But from a service level, I love this. If I'm Virginia Tech, it, again, speaks on what Daddy Antonelli said earlier today in the Fast Lane. They're heading in the right direction. It's not just player retention. It's also the right kind of coaches. Am I pretending Virginia Tech is going to recruit and develop at a level like Duke basketball? Let's get real. No. or North Carolina if they're operating on all cylinders. No, but you want a program that can punch above their weight class and challenge those teams. This is the type of move that indicates Virginia Tech can do just that.
Number 1.
Meanwhile, speaking of Virginia Tech, former Virginia Tech head coach Buzz Williams agreeing to a 6-year deal to become the head coach of the Maryland Terrapins. Look, on the one hand, I'll give the guy credit. Players swear by him. He seems to be a guy that the players really back, and that is so crucial in this day and age. He is adept at getting a lot out of his talent. You could question the upside because it seems like things kind of grew stale with Sweet 16-ish, but not necessarily Elite 8 Final Four caliber teams for Buzz Williams. But Trey has preached on this numerously, and he'll probably go in depth again tomorrow in the Fast Lane as the former Virginia Tech Hokie that he is. But he was at Marquette 5-6 years. Virginia Tech, 5 to 6 years. Texas A&M, 5 to 6 years. Now Maryland. Next up, where he'll go after that, pick your Big 12 school because he's been in the Big East, the ACC, and the SEC. He just needs the Big 12, and he will have completed coaching in all of those areas. He's a hard charger. He's extremely meticulous. Go back into the Fast Lane archives. You'll have to dig on this one. I'm not ready with the soundbite. But Gary Parrish of CBS Sports had the bite a couple of years ago about how Buzz Williams is so meticulous that he will go through FOI, Freedom of Information Act requests for coaches at every college basketball program that's a public school to look at their contracts and base his offer. Like, that's the not hire an agent to do that. He's doing that himself. He's extremely particular. And because of that, it works well. He defends his players. But that type of meticulous attention to detail, I mean, look, you think I'm crazy, Trey, and TJ, and Ty, and Philip, and you'll probably all raise your hands with my elaborate folder systems and other random things like screaming attention to detail. Buzz takes it to a different level. It works, but if you're Maryland, get the resources behind him early because don't expect him to be there in 6+ years because that's the history of Buzz Williams. Meanwhile, when we return in the Fast Lane, a totally different angle of looking at sports. Faith Family Football, kind of. Jason Romano of Sports Spectrum. We never had him on. Hopefully this will be the first of many times, but we're slated to catch up with him next here in the Fast Lane about blending faith in sports and how you juggle that by finding guests, helping tell their story, and getting an idea of who they really are. That when we return, this is the Fast Lane on the VTR and Sports app, and ask that smart speaker open VTR and Sports.
Mark Dalton here with Terry Volkswagen. Get ready to fall head over heels for the perfect VW SUV. One size doesn't fit all, though, and that's why Volkswagen has an SUV for everyone. From the compact and affordable Volkswagen Taos to the tech-packed Tiguan and the spacious Volkswagen Atlas. No matter which one fits your lifestyle, you'll love the comfort, performance, and safety. Stop by Terry Volkswagen on Forest Road in Lynchburg or check us out online at terryvw.com. Terry Volkswagen. You'll love our cars.
When the thrill of playing ball turns into the agony of a broken windshield or car window, contact Apple Auto Glass. Your local auto glass repair shop on Allegheny Avenue in Lynchburg, Apple Auto Glass provide a professional assessment with the honesty from your neighbors, so you can get back to sharing the great moments this season.
Do you know what a cold climate heat pump is? They're a new generation of heat pumps from Tara Lee Mosley that provide substantially more heat than traditional heat pumps, even when it's 5 degrees outside. This means your electrical auxiliary heat runs less, saving you big time on your electric bill. And with the recent spikes in electric utility rates, that's crucial. Plus, these new heat pumps qualify you for a $2,000 federal tax credit. Contact Tara Lee Mosley for more info on the new cold climate heat pumps.
When you're voted one of the best plumbers according to Lynchburg Living magazine, you want to hire the best. Sullivan Plumbing wants the best plumbers to join our award-winning team. Do you have a clean driving record? Do you have at least 4 years plumbing experience? Then you're a 5-star recruit, and Sullivan Plumbing would love to meet with you. Take the first step. Call Sullivan Plumbing in downtown Lynchburg or email sullivanplumbing@gmail.com.
Step into the Fast Lane 24/7 at Trey Lyle VT and Fast Lane Ed Lane on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, back to the fast lane.
Look, I'm not even going to pretend that I'm good enough to come up with these April Fool's jokes that pop up on April Fool's Day, because today is the 1st of April. And so I just, again, looked at the calendar. Okay, let's be leery of what might be out there on the social media spheres for news and take it with a grain of salt. So if you're wondering why we haven't done that today in the fast lane, that's because, I'm not great at the pranks and those type of things. So just got to keep it real in regards to that. But this is not an April Fool's joke. If you've listened to the fast lane the last couple of years, when we get to the April, May, June, and even a chunk of July till ACC Media Days, we love getting into a lot more in-depth stories about things that have gone on. And some of them lead to, great discussions over a long period of time. And, we're based in Lynchburg, in case you're unfamiliar with us, about 10 minutes from Liberty University's campus. And there are a lot of folks in our Liberty audience that are faith-based people. I'm unabashedly a Christian myself, although non-judgmental about that. Although if you're wondering where these spurts of energy come from, some days it's great, some days it's not. It's because I gave up chocolate and everything but protein shakes. I can kind of get away with that. Got to have a way to get that down. But chocolate and anything else for Lent. And so the energy level has actually started to rise the last couple of weeks. And I'm almost tempted to keep riding this thing out once we get to Easter Sunday in about 2.5 weeks. But got time to figure that one out a little bit later. But bringing that up because over the time and strengthening my own faith, you just kind of look for different ways to do that. And one of the ways is the Sports Spectrum podcast. Of course, we host the Fast Lane, we talk sports, and then finding a way to kind of blend the elements of sports and faith is a real cool thing and concept. And there are a lot of episodes I haven't gotten to. There are a lot of them. It'll take me a while to even go through the archives. I don't know if I'll be able to do that, but I picked it up recently. And one of the fascinating parts of this is we welcome in the host of that podcast with Matt Forte. It's Jason Romano, and Jason joins us here in the Fast Lane. Jason, first of all, thank you for your time. Great to be speaking with you. We greatly appreciate it. But, one of the things that has jumped out just listening over the last couple of months to the Sports Spectrum podcast is the variation. Some of these are figures that have been on multiple times and the stories of their faith are relatively known. Some of them are more unknown because they may not be as outspoken about it. Baker Mayfield a couple of weeks ago is an example of that. You had the professional boxer Antonio Vargas on today. I heard that one this afternoon. How much does that surprise you even more when you kind of get an in-depth look at certain people where maybe, I'm not saying you were judging them as not being faith-based people, but maybe you really didn't have an idea. And after talking to them, your entire perspective changes.
Yeah. Ed, thanks for having me on your show. I think it's wonderful when you discover, if you will, that somebody has a deep-rooted faith. And sometimes you can find that on their social media pages, or you hear them mention, CJ Stroud is a guy who comes to mind from the Texans. He talks about his faith, I think, in every interview. He always points to the Lord, which is really interesting. But others may not, and they just kind of keep it to themselves, or they're not confident, or whatever it is. But sometimes we're able to have them on and really kind of pull that out of them a little bit. We're unashamedly Christian-based, and we're unashamedly going to make sure that our interviews are different than a lot of the, ESPNs of the world, my former employer type of interviews, because we want to ask them about what for, many of these people are the most important thing in their life. And they don't normally talk about it. And I think they know going in, if they're going to come on our show, they're going to be asked about their faith. So they're willing to talk about it. But for someone like Baker, you mentioned Baker Mayfield, he hadn't talked openly about his faith really anywhere that I could find. I did some research and I was trying to see, is there any interviews or anything that he had done? And there wasn't. And so I kind of felt like we had something here, but he was very cordial and willing. And he's like, yeah, let's go. And as you heard, or whoever might have listened, Matt and I both asked him questions about his walk with Christ, and he answered them in a really cool way. I thought, he never tried to pretend to be perfect or have it all figured out. But then again, who does, right, Ed? So I thought it was great. I really did.
You mentioned Baker Mayfield, and I think back to his time at Oklahoma, and he had the flag planting incident, and those things to me are not. It doesn't mean you're not a faith-based person. I will, as I've gotten older, try to give more grace, in particular when it's the heat of the moment in competition and battle. But how do you put that into context of sometimes people are doing things that deliberately could counter their faith? Some of it just seems to be. It's the spirit of competition, and some guys are like Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma, more spirited than others.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think about this a lot because let's say we have on a guest or we write a story about a guest or even feature someone in our magazine, which to me, that's the highest level of what we would say a player or an athlete have been vetted properly as far as their walk with the Lord, because we don't want to misrepresent, anyone as far as what they believe, but also misrepresent Jesus, if we're being honest here, in the Gospels. But all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Not to bring in scripture here, Ed, but we've all messed up and we've all messed up. Some of us, most of us haven't messed up in a very public way. But, if I had a camera on me 24/7 or when I was in the most pressure filled, heated moment, I'm sure there'd be moments where I didn't act, Christ-like, if you will, or the way you would hope a Christian would act either. I think what we try to do is we try to, remember the grace part that you said, Ed, and remember, and we've had conversations with many of these athletes about, hey, the Bible talks a lot about taming the tongue and about watching our language and about caring ourselves and serving and loving one another. And when you're out on a football field and you're screaming and yelling, or you're planting flags, or you're pushing people, what is that? And some of them have just said, listen, it's 3 hours and I'm not my best. And I repent and I move on but you also have millions of people watching you and kids watching you. Others have said, nope, including Brock Purdy from the Niners, who was just on the podcast a couple days ago. He said, listen, I pray during the game. I have to carry myself properly. Kirk Cousins said this on our show as well. When the game's going on, I'm still a Christian and I have to remember that. And, I try to have grace and understand that not everybody's perfect. And, some people, coaches, a lot of the coaches that we've had on, sometimes they get caught in a heated moment arguing with a referee or an official. Maybe a coarse word or two comes out of their mouth. And you just remember it's the heat of the battle. And I'm sure if you or I were caught in moments like that, we probably mess up a little bit too.
I mean, I remember I was there when Tony Bennett got a technical foul at Virginia and we were all
of all the people, right?
and after the game, he got his usher on, we call it that in the fast lane, because he confessed to us that, hey, he uttered some words that he normally would not utter and probably would not utter at Sunday worship. And it happens to the best of people in those moments, which, you have a former athlete with Matt Forte who does this with you on the show. And again, you mentioned this as Jason Romano is with us here from Sports Spectrum in the fast lane, but the level of context, I'm sure you're competitive in certain areas and you may have discussed this in shows that I haven't quite gotten to yet. So please forgive me if you don't mind for not knowing all those details.
It's okay.
But look, I can only retain so much in this small cranium of mine.
Yes, sir.
But from Matt's perspective, how much is that kind of giving you the understanding that different athletes are at different points in their level of faith and even being able to control that to the extent that, everybody's wired differently, everybody's background is different, and the ultimate journey, it is a journey. It's not one stagnant point with your faith.
And it's a walk with your faith, not a run or a sprint. And I just think about my walk. It started when I was 27. And I say started like it was a legit starting point. I didn't know anything. So if you had hung out with me the first couple of years of my walk, I don't know if I was even the first 5 or 10 years, I hope I was representing better later than I was earlier, but I had a lot going on, and I was not the best representative of my faith early on. And I think we just got to remember that with people, that some people are at different stages. And, unfortunately, what people in my circle do, especially those that are in faith-based organizations, maybe not even sports organizations, but just faith-based or churches or whatever, they'll see a guy proclaim Jesus and suddenly he's up on the pulpit on a Sunday morning the next week being interviewed or even preaching. And that scares me to death, because just because somebody says the name Jesus or God or faith doesn't mean they're automatically ready to go up on a pulpit on a Sunday morning and be preaching at church. I mean, there is a thing called sanctification, which is a really big word that you have to, it just means growing in your faith and learning and building a relationship with Jesus. It takes a little while. I didn't ever get in front of a pulpit for, I don't know, I think it was 13 years after I ever, became a Christian. And I don't even think I was ready when I did 13 years later. So I just think we have to remember when we're watching these athletes, everybody's at different stages. Some are a little bit more mature in their faith than others. Brock Purdy, again, a great example of somebody at 25 years old who's incredibly mature in his faith. But then there's other guys I've talked to in their 30s and 40s who are just not quite there yet. And that's okay. Everybody's at a different, pace, a different part of their journey. As long as they're on the journey, we want to talk to them and kind of help them along and see if it's something that we can support them and encourage them to keep going and fight the good fight and get on that track and keep racing.
Jason Romano with us here in the Fast Lane. He's the executive producer and the co-host of the Sports Spectrum podcast, where it's interviewing athletes and connecting with them. And sometimes it's just he and his co-host Matt Forte discussing different topics in sports in general, but faith is part of that. Did that draw you away, the opportunity to talk faith, from when you were at ESPN, or was it more you were pulled away from ESPN, you didn't quite know why, and then all of a sudden, years later, it's become more crystallized?
No, it's funny you asked that, because I think when I left ESPN, it had nothing to do with ESPN. Like, oh, they're doing this, or they're acting this way, or they're preventing me from doing. It was nothing like that. I was there 17 years. I loved working there. It's an incredible blessing. I'm probably not on shows like this with you, Ed, if I hadn't worked there. And I totally understand that. But it was just time for me as, a guy in my early 40s at the time, to just follow what I felt was the Lord calling me to something else. And it was a calling. I mean, I didn't get a raise. I got a pay cut of about 40% when I left ESPN. I wasn't getting all the benefits and all the perks that come with, a lot of times when you leave a job at that stage of life to move on to another job. I legitimately was doing this because I felt it was a calling. I felt it was something that was a test a little bit, and, a leap of faith, to use that analogy or that wording. I just felt like it was time. And if I wasn't going to do it at that point, at 42, I probably would never have done it at the age I'm at now at 51, because I would have probably been too comfortable and not wanting to mess this whole thing up as I get closer and closer to, retirement age or whatever. But at that time, it was the right time. And, there was a real excitement, if you will, to be able to talk to athletes about their faith. But I didn't know what that would turn into, or if I'd still be there 8 years later. And here I am. I certainly didn't know if I'd ever be working with an athlete on the show like I am with Matt Forte, but I'm grateful. And I think as I took that step and that leap into the next phase of my journey, I started to see clearer and clearer that this was the path that God wanted me to continue to take, because it led into a couple books that I wrote, a lot of speaking opportunities, and even hosting my own show that I'd never done that since college. And now I was able to do a lot of those things post ESPN. So I saw what the Lord was doing, as I look back. But initially, you're just taking that one step through the door and hoping that, it's going to work out.
Jason, there are a lot of angles that we could go with our chats today in the Fast Lane and with future discussions. We are out of time for today. We greatly appreciate yours. Kind of a warm introduction to what you guys do with the Sports Spectrum podcast. I look forward to hearing more of them, and be warned that there may be something that is discussed in the Sports Spectrum podcast episode in the future that sparks my interest. And unfortunately, that means you'll have to open an email from me.
Let's do it. Thanks, Ed.
Our pleasure. Jason Romano with us here from Sports Spectrum and hanging out with us today in the Fast Lane. Just a different look at sports. And I mean, look, we're blessed. And there are different parts of the country where this would be, people would almost be protesting outside the Virginia Talk Radio Network studios. Whereas here, we're 10 minutes from Liberty University, and a lot of our audience very receptive to this. So we're extremely fortunate in that area. But I know a lot of people are just looking for ways to grow, and some people are not as faith-based as possible. And we've said this before, whether it's that, politics, certainly social issues that have popped up over the years. 2020 is the most notable year of that, where we try to be as non-judgmental as possible, just to give everybody an opportunity to figure out where they are on their faith-based journey. By the way, TJ, pot up that music, because that's what we're supposed to be doing as we get ready to head out. In the meantime, we appreciate your time. We're back tomorrow, 5 to 6 p.m. VTR and Sports app, and ask that smart speaker, open VTR and Sports. Thanks for listening to The Fast Lane on VTR and Sports, 93.3 FM, W227 BG Timberlake.